and to prioritise their lives, and a clear message that there can be no reoccupation or reduction of Gazan territory, and that those displaced have the right to return home. I urge the government to play its part in ending the illegal settlements and settler violence in the West Bank and create a plan for the reconstruction and renewal of Gaza. We must do more without delay to deal with the humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in front of us as we work simultaneously towards a better future. Many more lives will be lost if we do not act now.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very grateful for the constructive tone of my counterpart, and we are in agreement. We are pushing for a further pause. We regard this as imperative. The success, as it were, of the last one showed the utility of a pause in terms of the increased flow of humanitarian support, and we continue to strain every sinew in terms of our diplomacy to aim for that. The Foreign Secretary made that argument to his various ministerial colleagues last week, and will continue to do that with his counterpart and ministerial counterparts right across the Middle East. She mentioned the safe zone. That is something we continue to monitor, and officials in the region are seeing how that unfolds with regard to the humanitarian impact. But she's absolutely right when she draws the House's attention to the grievous impact in terms of the humanitarian impact of disease. We are confident that the way we are channeling our funds through the UN agencies is the right way to go about that. That's the UNRWA, OCHA and UNICEF. But of course, the scale of increase of need is something that's hugely alarming, and we are very painfully aware that it is women and children who often bear the most unfortunate brunt of this sort of impact. We are redoubling efforts, I can give her that assurance. Clearly our financial contribution has tripled, but that goes in hand with our political efforts, because it is only through a lasting peace that she referred to that this will be resolved. The humanitarian component, Madam Deputy Speaker, is clearly of utmost urgency, but we must not forget the political, which runs in tandem, and our stance when it comes to the illegal settlements in the West Bank, and our continued support, our long-standing support for a sustainable solution that sees Palestinian statehood at the heart of the future of the region is undiminished. And that's something that, in addition to our humanitarian efforts, our political effort and our diplomatic effort will continue to argue for Palestinian statehood as the seed for a long-term solution in the region.
Father of the House, Sir Peter Bottomley.
Mr Speaker, the House will welcome the bipartisan support for what the British Government is trying to do. Most of us know that our direct power in the area ended over 70 years ago. Can I, through the Minister, put to those who just want to have a simple ceasefire that would be helped a permanent end to violence if people around Israel recognised Israel within its recognised international boundaries, and if Israel could make sure it could withdraw to its own boundaries and stop the aggressive settler activity outside their own areas in the West Bank.
Speaker, the Father of the House makes a very, very good point. Our analysis is that the two-state solution, in which both sides respect the right of each other to exist, and there's an end to settlement and settler violence, is an essential precondition to any long-term peace in the region.
SNP spokesperson Brendan O'Hara.
Madam Deputy Speaker, exactly as they said they would at the end of the humanitarian pause, Israel has resumed its offensive in Gaza with full force, including an appalling attack on the MSF aid convoy, and official figures estimate 1,000 Palestinians were killed this weekend alone. There is a massacre of innocent civilians taking place right now, and it's blatantly obvious that all appeals made by the UK government and others for Israel to avoid civilian casualties are being ignored. And I wonder just how much this government now regrets giving Netanyahu that blank cheque, particularly as millions of displaced people are being squeezed into a wasteland on the Egyptian border, and the indiscriminate bombing continues. At the weekend, the EU's Foreign Policy Chief, Joseph Borrell, echoed Scotland's First Minister when he said that the solution can only be political, one which is centred on two states. And he's correct. So can I ask the Minister, what is holding the UK Government back from officially recognising the state of Palestine as a fundamental first step to achieving a long-term solution to this awful crisis?
You're here.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful for the contribution by the Honourable Gentleman. Of course, we are painfully aware of the tragic and significant human impact, especially with regards to civilian casualties of the military operation. But to simplify it to the degree that forgets that Hamas is the terrorist group that is prosecuting atrocities we must see, frankly, the civilian casualties as a product of the terrible conflict that has resulted because of the Hamas terrorist atrocity on the 7th of October. We continue to argue very strongly and make the point to Israel that military operations must be conducted according to humanitarian law and avoiding civilian casualties. And he made a point about the two-state solution. Clearly, one of the major obstacles to this two-state solution is Hamas itself. This is a terrorist group that is committed to the destruction of Israel, and if Hamas were in charge, there would be no two-state solution. So a necessary prerequisite is the evolution of a better form of Palestinian leadership in Gaza.
Kit Malthouse.
Madam Deputy Speaker, if the RAF can fly surveillance planes over the Gaza Strip in the much-needed search for hostages and to help in their release, what is to stop us flying cargo planes over and parachuting food and medicines to a starving population?
Well, my honourable friend will have heard in my opening statement that a very significant tonnage of humanitarian aid has been delivered via UK aircraft, 74 tonnes currently. So I think we are redoubling that, and we are looking also I think greater utility lies in the assessment as to whether or not there can be a maritime route for an increase in humanitarian supply.
Chair of the International Development Select Committee, Sarah Champion.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the responses the Minister is giving, but I actually want to hear the Foreign Secretary's response. We had a session with the humanitarian organisations on the ground in Gaza on the 16th of November. It was harrowing. We wrote to the Foreign Secretary. We've not had a reply. We've not had a reply about when he's going to come in front of our committee. So with such a horrific and fast-moving situation happening in Israel and Gaza, when can this House expect to hear from the Foreign Secretary?
I'm sure it will be very soon, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Andrew Percy.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the idea that settlements are the reason there is not a two-state solution is just complete and utter tosh, Madam Deputy Speaker. The reason there is not a two-state solution is because Hamas seek the total genocide and ethnic cleansing of the state of Israel. They seek to murder every single Jew. They use the most awful sexual violence against women on October the 7th. Some of those reports we read in shocking detail in the Times this weekend. Not a word at the dispatch boxes from either side so far of the message of the information of abuse of hostages who have been released, or a condemnation of this particular violence. That is why there has not been a two-state solution. So can the Minister confirm that this government will continue to stay strong and support Israel in all of its activities to root out this murderous terrorist cult?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't know if my honourable friend heard my previous answer, in which I said that a principal blockage to a two-state solution was Hamas itself. It is a terrorist group that has committed the most heinous terrorist act, and we are therefore we continue to be supportive of Israel defending its people and its security.
Ben Bradshaw. Sir Ben.
Palestinians have lost all hope of a two-state solution thanks to the policies of the Netanyahu government in recent years. And would it not give them some hope if we followed other countries' lead and honoured the vote taken in this House 9 years ago to recognise Palestinian statehood?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think our efforts are focused on a more pragmatic avenue of working with allies in the region to ensure that there's a sustainable, more meaningful support right across the region for a two-state solution.
Sir Julian Lewis.
The government accepts that there can be no political solution unless Hamas is removed from control in Gaza. Can the Minister explain to us who exactly will remove Hamas from that level of control in Gaza?
The political future of the Palestinians is a matter for Palestinians.
Leila Moran.
Speaker, I'd like to start by agreeing with the member opposite who spoke about the condemnation, the rightful condemnation of the genocidal words from Hamas. This is the extremes of the debate, and on the other side of the extremes of the debate are ministers in the Israeli government calling for a dropping of a nuclear bomb on Gaza, calling the siege of Gaza and the spread of epidemics as a good thing. These extremes do not represent where the majority of Palestinians and Israelis and the population across the world want to be, which is with this government on two states. My question is simple, however. Two states is all very well to say, but what is the FCDO, in terms of its resources, actually doing to make it happen?
Nothing.
Well, Madam Speaker, our considerable resource by way of humanitarian aid and political and diplomatic effort is entirely focused on that, and we bring a considerable diplomatic heft in terms of our relationships across the region. We are an important member of the permanent P5 of the Security Council, so we mustn't underestimate our own ability to bring positive political leverage to this situation, and that is something we are resolutely focused on.
Sir Michael Ellis.
Madam Deputy Speaker, over the weekend, the Times newspaper carried chilling testimony of Hamas's extreme violence against women on the 7th of October. Gang rape, women found with bloodied underwear, broken bones from rape, beheading, women found with gunshots to their private parts. It doesn't bear thinking about what Israeli women held in Hamas captivity have endured and may still be enduring now, those hostages. So will my right honourable friend join me in condemning these appalling acts of violence and this aspect of the ongoing humanitarian situation? And does he also acknowledge that Hamas terrorists have spoken in custody quite openly of their orders to rape and defile women?
I would agree with my right honourable friend that these are deeply shocking reports. These are sadly and very painfully characteristic of the kind of terrorist violence that we've come to expect from Hamas, and whilst they are shocking, we deeply condemn them.
Rishinara Ali.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last week I had the opportunity to visit Qatar with the parliamentary delegation. We met with Dr. Al-Ansari, one of the official spokesperson involved with the negotiations for hostage release and the temporary humanitarian truce, with Egypt, US, Israel and others. What was clear was that this was a fragile truce that required greater pressure from the international community on all relevant parties, from the Middle East countries like Qatar on Hamas, from the US and the UK on the Israelis, to bring an end to this bloodshed. What is our government doing as a permanent member of the UN Security Council and as a G7 member to use its powers to ensure that there is work done to bring an end to the bloodshed, to ensure that there is work being done to bring a permanent ceasefire? That is what people need, of all backgrounds, of all communities. We need a peace-building process. We need our government to act. What is our government doing?
Speaker, we continue to use all levers at our disposal to argue for another humanitarian pause. Regretfully, discussion of a ceasefire, it seems, is premature given that Hamas is committed to the destruction of the State of Israel. So we are resolutely committed to another humanitarian pause, and we're using all means that are available to us to argue for it.
Can I remind the Minister of the words of the Prime Minister at Mansion House? He said the UK will act to shape the world, not be shaped by it. And I raised that point to the Minister. With regards to the loss of lives that we've seen across the board, we have to do everything we can to preserve human lives. And I've supported, at the very early stage, humanitarian pauses to do that. But the time has come for the UK to take a lead at the UN as a member of the Security Council. Lead at the Security Council. Call for a ceasefire. With regards, we all have our own views in this matter. Having supported humanitarian pauses before, a time has come for the UK to work towards a ceasefire, release of all the hostages, humanitarian assistance and a political solution in line with our own Security Council Resolution 242 on the 67 borders. When will we push that at the Security Council and lead the world on this matter?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are continuing to shape the outcome. We are continuing to shape the outcome, and for us, the most pragmatic and useful outcome at the moment is to argue strongly for a further humanitarian pause.
Sir Tony Lloyd.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. If every humanitarian pause is simply a prelude to the further bombing by Israel of Gaza, what will be left other than a refugee camp and a wasteland? And who does the Minister think will govern that?
Well, he makes a good point. Of course, every civilian death is a tragedy, and the House is painfully aware of the human cost of the unfolding tragedy. As I said, aside from military operations, the political future and the way that Palestinians represent themselves, that is a question for Palestinians.
Mark Pritchard.
I welcome the government's support of the extension of the
to work with international allies towards a permanent ceasefire, release of hostages and a proper political solution.
She made a good point about the impact on hospitals, and that's why, of course, we've tripled our aid and we're focused on channeling our aid through the UN agencies that can most effectively help people in hospitals, whether it's by provision of fuel or other supplies. That is the groundwork that will, we hope, eventually unlock the political phase of improving the solution. But it's humanitarian first with the politics in tandem, and that's what we're also doing.
Andrew Selous.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The sexual violence meted out by Hamas on the 7th of October was absolutely horrendous. In the second half of last month, a number of members on both sides of this House received details passed on by a doctor in Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, who said that 3 of his children and 3 of his grandchildren were among the 45 men, women and children in his house who'd all been destroyed that afternoon while he was working a hospital shift. We are piling misery on misery. So as one former infantry soldier to another, can I ask my honourable friend to make sure the British government renews its plea for as great a precision as possible in the pursuit of the terrorists, so we don't lose more civilian lives in that way?
Madam Deputy Speaker, he speaks with experience and knowledge, and we are making exactly those pleas to our Israeli colleagues.
Ian Paisley.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. 8 weeks after the murder, unjustifiable murder of Jewish people in Israel, the countless raping of Israeli and Jewish women, is the Minister disappointed that the United Nations Women's Group made the most facile and mealy-mouthed statement that could not even use the word rape in describing what had happened? And will he use his influence and the government's influence in drawing the attention of the United Nations to getting on side in this issue and condemning sexual violence against women and the rape of women? Just because they're Jews does not mean that they do not matter. And that point should be made to the United Nations over and over again.
Madam Deputy Speaker, of course, these reports are shocking. We certainly condemn it. Rape is rape, and we must call it out.
Steve Double.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The more details we learn of the barbaric attacks of the 7th of October and the treatment of the victims, especially the women, the more horrific it becomes. And one can only imagine at the sheer anguish of the families of the victims go through on a daily basis the more information that comes out. So can my right honourable friend tell me what humanitarian support is being provided to the families of the victims of Hamas?
Well, Madam Speaker, that's a terribly good question, and of course a large proportion of our tripled humanitarian aid budget of £60 million will be channelled through UNICEF and the other 2 UN agencies, UNRWA and OCHA, a large proportion of which will support women affected by conflict.
Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm sorry, I must press the Minister because I don't feel that he has answered on what the government's strategy is, particularly the political strategy. We all
We all feel it so strongly. No child should ever be the target of a terrorist or in any conflict. So what is the government's political strategy to protect the lives of children?
Our strategy is to exert all effort to bring about peace.
You ministers, growing success in getting aid into Gaza and the tripling of UK aid. But even as my right honourable friend works urgently to get aid in the shortest time possible to the needy civilians of Gaza, will the government also redouble its efforts to bring about a diplomatic solution, perhaps using a contact group, in order that we can grow humanitarian pauses into a just and lasting peace and a two-state solution?
Exactly our strategy is to use diplomatic effort in concert with our humanitarian effort to bring about a situation whereby diplomacy can take effect and the foundations can be laid of a long-term peace. Clearly we are not there yet, but it will require a huge amount of diplomatic effort right across the region and the close relationship with many parties, and that's something to which we can bring a great deal of expertise and utility.
As Shah.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. What actions has the government implemented to integrate its approach to prevention atrocities into the UK's foreign and development policies, and how has it involved the Office for Conflict Stabilisation and Mediation's Mass Atrocity Prevention Hub in conducting a risk assessment of Israel's actions in Gaza?
Prevention and the issues she mentioned, they are woven into the fabric of our diplomacy, and they are hugely important in all of our work right across the Middle East, but none more so than the OPC.
Mr Carmichael.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Committee for the Protection of Journalists have said that 57 Palestinian journalists have been killed in the Gaza Strip since the 7th of October. They say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that that is the worst period for the killing of journalists since they started keeping records in 1992. Does that not just illustrate the wholly indiscriminate nature of what is being done by the IDF? And will he impress upon the Netanyahu government the complete unacceptability of that situation?
Well, Madam Speaker, I don't share his description of wholly indiscriminate. I don't accept that. But of course, I take seriously his note about 57 journalists. That is tragic, but I would take issue with his characterisation as wholly indiscriminate. Of course, we make representations to Israel to constrain and focus their operations, and we will continue to do so.
Ruth Jones.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Like so many other members of this House, I received hundreds of emails again this weekend from Newport West constituents who are appalled and horrified at the continuing killing of Palestinian innocent men, women and children. They want the killing to stop. So will the Minister condemn acts of violence and extremism by Israeli settlers in the West Bank and call on the Israeli authorities to prevent settler violence, ensure accountability for perpetrators and condemn extremist rhetoric?
Of course, this government is on record, and I've said it already in this statement, we do condemn, we have condemned settler violence in the West Bank, but we must be very clear that this military operation is underway in Gaza because of the terrorist atrocity carried out by Hamas on the 7th of October. That's the terrible and tragic truth.
Slaughter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now over 15,000 civilians have been killed in Gaza, and Israel's military operations have not abated following the pause in fighting. What specific requests is the government making to its Israeli counterparts to stop the killing? When the Minister says a ceasefire is premature, it sounds like a tacit acceptance that disproportionate and indiscriminate destruction of civilian areas is a legitimate means of Israel pursuing its war aims.
A ceasefire would only be possible if Hamas hadn't stated its intent to wipe Israel off the face of the map and to perpetrate another atrocity of the nature of the 7th of October. What we are doing is arguing for a humanitarian pause to bring de-escalation and to allow the further flow of humanitarian aid.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I echo the calls for a long-term political solution to this dreadful conflict and an end to the international community, including this government, resigning it to the too difficult pile. In the absence of a permanent ceasefire that I'm sure we all want to see, does the Minister recognise and will he reinforce the warnings from the United States and others that Israel's actions in Gaza must be proportionate? Otherwise, they are in clear breach of international law, as the comprehensive amount of evidence from multiple agencies on the ground working in Gaza strongly suggests. I'm sure that he cares deeply about humanitarian issues. So will he join me in rejecting the idea that sending texts or QR codes to advise people to evacuate a war zone when there is no internet and no power to charge phones is wholly inadequate and cannot protect civilians and save innocent lives?
We have called and we continue to call on Israel to abide by international humanitarian law. That's not a doubt. Their military response must be proportionate, and we continue to argue strongly that they show constraint in their pursuit of the terrorist operatives of Hamas embedded in the Gaza Strip.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On Friday, the hopes of a permanent ceasefire turned to despair with the continuation of the collective punishment and killing of Palestinian civilians, a large proportion of whom are women and children in what the United Nations are calling unprecedented numbers. Yet the Secretary of State has just said that ceasefire would be, and I quote, premature. Can he clarify whether there is any limit at all of the number of Palestinian civilians that this government supports killing before calling for a permanent ceasefire? And can he explain what he understands to be the long-term plan with regards to Gaza and how this plan is in keeping with international law?
Well, regrettably, it's not the case that Hamas wants a ceasefire. It would be good if that was the case. It's not. They are a terrorist group committed to the destruction of Israel, and they are on record as stating their desire to perpetrate another atrocity on the scale of the 7th of October. So while that is the fact, the consequence inevitably is an Israeli military response. We support their right to protect their sovereignty. We implore them to show constraint and to avoid civilian casualties. And attendant to that, we will argue for a further humanitarian pause to allow humanitarian aid to flow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Israel is clearly undertaking an act of cleansing of the entire population of Gaza. It is illegal within international law. It in no way is a proportionate response to the appalling events of October the 7th. So could I ask him, what does he think Israel's long-term objective is? Is it to expel the entire population of Gaza into Egypt? And could he say, what is the role and purpose and military objective of British military participation in the whole area? And can he assure us that there are no British soldiers on the ground in Gaza?
Speaker, unsurprisingly, I don't share his assessment or his view of the context. And of course, it's clear that the Israeli objective is to defend itself against the terrorist group of Hamas.
Julie Elliott.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Earlier in this UQ, the Minister said he was forthright and the British Government was forthright in the condemnation of the atrocities of the 7th of October, which everyone agrees with. When is the British Government going to be forthright in its condemnation of the murder of innocent Palestinian children? 15,000 people have died so far. At the start of this conflict, half of the Gazan population were children. When is the British Government going to call that out and say enough is enough?
We continue to argue for constraint and restraint and the application of military power according to humanitarian law, and we will continue to do that.
Shalomi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. James Lee from Save the Children, the director of the occupied Palestinian territories, just returned from a 5-day trip in Gaza. He writes, a young child might not understand what is happening, but they see destruction around them. They see their homes, schools, communities destroyed. They hear everything that's happening around them. The airstrikes, the cries for help. They feel the terror, the insecurity, the helplessness. Many members and right honourable members this afternoon have raised the issue of innocent children being killed. Innocent children who have no cause in what's going on. We cannot watch while this continues. So does the Minister agree that unless we work towards a definitive ceasefire, that is the only way to sustainable peace in the region?
Well, Madam Secretary, she makes she draws a very painful allusion to the view of Save the Children, and of course I should say that that's why a large portion of our increased aid budget is going to UNICEF to support children affected by this. And of course, we would all like a de-escalation and a ceasefire, but while Hamas remains intent on perpetrating another atrocity like the 7th of October, it's very hard to see how there could be no other response than a military one in terms of Israel defending its sovereignty.
Patrick Grady.
Mr Speaker, the Office of the Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court has issued a call for evidence regarding possible breaches of international humanitarian law in Israel and Palestine. Is the UK Government in a position to, and indeed will it be, contributing to that investigation?
Not at this stage, but of course we will continue to take note.
Blackened by mould, eaten by worms and mulled by stray dogs. That was the fate, Madam Deputy Speaker, of 4 premature babies who medical staff were forced to leave behind after being forced to evacuate the Al Nasser hospital in just 30 minutes by the Israeli military. Just what was the crime of these 4 vulnerable premature babies who were left to an unimaginable fate? And just how does the Minister plan on telling me that a humanitarian pause helped them when a ceasefire would have saved them?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, he talks painfully about a humanitarian impact. Of course, the tragedy is that Hamas does not want a ceasefire, and therefore the conflict will surely continue.
Clive Efford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I accept that Hamas is a terrorist organisation and that their infrastructure needs to be dismantled so that they can't commit any more atrocities. But that doesn't justify the unrelenting bombing that we saw return to Gaza over the weekend. Has the government satisfied itself that Israeli bombing is precision bombing against terrorist targets? And if it hasn't been able to satisfy itself of that, why isn't it calling for a ceasefire?
Madam Deputy Speaker, we have argued and we will continue to argue for constraint, and the whole House will share the anguish he expresses about the humanitarian and the human impact. But we continue to make the argument to Israel that they must be restrained and they must follow international humanitarian law.
Rishi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The UN Secretary-General recently said, "We are witnessing a killing of civilians that is unparalleled and unprecedented in any conflict since he has been a Secretary-General. Over 16,000 Palestinians are dead, 70% are women and children. Hospitals are being flooded with influx of dead bodies, over 41,000 injured, 84,000 people with diarrhea, 100,000 with acute respiratory things, thousands of people trapped under the rubble. 80% of the Gazan population is now internally displaced. There are bombs everywhere in Gaza. There is no safe place for these people to go to. So when will the government ask for a definitive ceasefire and allow access for humanitarian?
Speaker, she paints a very moving picture of the terrible human cost, and that is why we have continued and we will continue with renewed effort to call for a humanitarian pause so that a greater degree of aid can flow.
Stephen Farry.
Thanks very much. I'm a strong advocate of full and proper ceasefire as a prelude to a wider political process. However, work has to be done to create the conditions for a ceasefire, including the potential provision of security guarantees. So what plans does the government have to discuss with international partners the creation of some form of peacekeeping or monitoring presence, either under the basis of the United Nations or some form of ad hoc arrangement, with including in particular the Arab states, in order to provide some form of confidence-building measures?
Madam Secretary, the Honourable Gentleman makes a very interesting point, and I think we are certainly using our regional network of diplomacy and diplomatic presence to discuss regional solutions that may involve other Arab states, because the political settlement will depend on regional, a long-term sustainable regional support, and whatever the outcome might be.
Manjeet Singh Desai.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to see an end to the violence in Gaza, which is what I recently voted for along with Labour colleagues. After the end of the fragile ceasefire last week, we desperately need the UK government to work with international allies and push for peace, with the release of all hostages and the end of the killing of thousands of innocent Palestinians. So, Minister, as winter sets in, does he share my concerns about about a potential outbreak of cholera and other waterborne diseases and the risk of starvation and dehydration? And what steps is the government taking to avert that ongoing crisis?
Yes, Madam Speaker, we are acutely aware of the manifold health risk in Gaza. That's why we have tripled our aid budget, and a lot will be channelled through OCHA, UNICEF and UNRWA to attend to the risks posed by cholera and other diseases. And of course we continue to push for peace, and a humanitarian pause would be the first step towards that.
Beth Winter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On the 30th of October, the IDF evacuation order directed Gazan civilians southward, triggering mass internal displacement, which the IDF said was for their own safety. On the 1st of December, the IDF ordered people to leave districts in Khan Yunis where many had gone for their own safety, saying they were in dangerous combat zones. Given the IDF military action now stretches from Gaza City in the north to Rafah in the south, does the Minister agree with the UN's Volga Turk that there is no safe place in Gaza? And does he agree that only a permanent ceasefire can end this collective punishment of the Palestinians?
Speaker, she makes a good point, but I mean, tragically, the reason is that Hamas have often sought to embed themselves amongst civilian infrastructure, and as long as that is the case, then tragedy will ensue. The solution is a de-escalation, a defeat of Hamas, and in the first instance, a humanitarian pause to improve humanitarian access.
Mari Rimmer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Allegations of breaches of international humanitarian law should always be treated with the utmost seriousness. Assessing specific allegations is the proper task of lawyers in competent international courts. Does the Minister recognise with Labour that the International Criminal Court jurisdiction must address the conduct of all parties in Gaza?
Well, of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have long been on the record for calling for all parties to abide by international humanitarian law.
Mohammed Yassin.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the Israeli authorities are now bombing South Gaza, the very area is asked civilians to reach to be safe. Does the Minister agree with me that the supply of arms to Israeli government must be suspended, given the serious violations amounting to crime under international law are being committed?
Madam Deputy Speaker, we support, and we're on record of supporting, Israel's right to defend itself, and therefore our relationship with Israel is in accordance with that. But of course, that doesn't mean that we don't at the same time argue for a de-escalation and a humanitarian pause and a return to peace.
Hal Williams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The UN Children's Fund says that Gaza is the most dangerous place in the world to be a child. Now, France has offered places in its hospitals to treat the most severely injured children. Will the Minister now make a similar offer to the injured children of Gaza?
And that's why a significant portion of our humanitarian aid, which we've trebled to 60 billion, will be channelled through UNICEF to attend to the need of children affected.
Marsha de Cordova.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We know that more than 15,000 Palestinians have been killed, and 70% of whom are women and children, and there are still thousands unaccounted for under rubble. Now, the events of the last 2 days demonstrate that a pause in fighting was never going to be sufficient. So I ask the Minister, what on earth will it take for his government to call for a permanent ceasefire on all sides to prevent the bombardment of Gaza's civilian infrastructure, including its hospitals, schools, or what's left of them, should I say, but also water facilities?
Of course, she's correct that the pause wasn't sufficient to meet all of the humanitarian needs, but that doesn't stop us arguing for a further pause, because, of course, that is the first step to a more sustainable path towards peace.
Bergen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I must say, the Minister comes across like a passive observer as the further horror unfolds. I wish he would use his agency in his role, because 1.8 million people in Gaza have been forcibly displaced. People were told to go south to avoid the bombing. Now Israel is indiscriminately bombing areas there. The UN says there is no safe place in Gaza. Above all, this is a war on children. So how many more children have to die before the government adds its name to the growing list of countries around the world calling for an immediate and sustained ceasefire?
I would say gently to the honourable gentleman, in actuality, this is a war on Hamas.
Debbie Abrahams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Surely the events after the weekend have shown that a temporary pause in cessation of hostilities is just not enough. And what we do need, as many others have said, and including the British public as a whole, want to see a permanent ceasefire. They want to see the release of hostages. They want to see a sustainable, credible political process so that we have safe and secure Palestinian states alongside a safe and secure Israeli state. But what in particular has come across at this statement is that there's absolutely no plan from the government. But I would like to ask this very quick question, Madam Deputy Speaker. How many UK citizens and UK visa holders are still remaining evacuation from Gaza?
One humanitarian pause is not, of course it's not enough, but that's why we're arguing for another. And that's an important part of our sense of there being a long-term obligation on us all to argue for a sustainable, long-term two-state solution.
Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Without a ceasefire or a truce in place, there is no safe zone in Gaza. And I've expressed concerns before about the inadequacy of al-Mawazi as a safe zone without any infrastructure or ability to get aid to innocent civilians. Given that the bombardment is happening and there seems to be no place for people to go, no hope for innocent civilians, does he share my worries that the constant bombardment is going to drive the besieged people of Gaza into the arms of extremists? And what representations are the government making to the Israeli government to express those concerns?
Frankly, the solution would be for Hamas to come out of their tunnels and surrender, and for Gaza to return to normality, and that's what we hope might happen.
Amy.
Madam Deputy Speaker, now I accept that Hamas is a terrorist organisation, but children, journalists, aid workers and innocent civilians have died and continue to be under threat in Gaza. There is now a potential outbreak of air and waterborne diseases. Surely it is now time for the UK government to finally call for a ceasefire as they work towards the release of all hostages and a political peace process.
She makes a good point about disease, and that's why a large portion of the tripled humanitarian fund of £16 million will be focused on the prevention of contagious diseases channeled through the three UN agencies.
Justin Madders.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We all want the killing to stop, and if we do get to a point where there is an end to the violence on a long-term basis, what guarantees can be obtained by the UK government that the many people who have been displaced will be allowed to return, and there will be sufficient infrastructure in place to ensure they have something to return to?
So he makes a good point about post-war reconstruction and the return of civilians, and of course I think the UK will be at the heart of the international response that will attend to that.
Sarah Sultana.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. A night of utterly relentless bombardment, the worst of the war so far. Those are the words of a UNICEF spokesperson this morning in Khan Yunis in the south of Gaza, where 1.8 million Palestinians are now trapped as Israeli bombs rain down on them. Ordered to flee the north, now slaughtered in the south. Nowhere is safe in Gaza. Even as UN experts warn of a grave risk of genocide, this government continues to give its full support to Israel, calling for pauses in the slaughter, not a permanent ceasefire and an end to the slaughter. So I ask, Is the Minister happy to be part of a government so deeply complicit in the horrors being inflicted on the Palestinian people?
Well, we continue to be forthright in our support for the absolute right of Israel to defend its people and its sovereignty, and the tragedy that has unfolded following the Hamas terrorist abomination on the 7th of October, of course, brings pain to all sides. But we will continue to be forthright in our commitment to Israel security and ultimately, hopefully, Palestinian statehood and a long-term sustainable peace in the Middle East.
Toby Perkins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There are many of us who absolutely recognise Israel's right to defend itself, who recognise that Hamas and their approach is a barrier to a lasting peace solution, who also absolutely despair that the government and the minister's calls for restraint on behalf of the Israeli government is being so ignored. So does he agree with me that the international community needs to make it absolutely clear to every combatant in this conflict that the International Criminal Court are watching, that people will be held to account for their conduct, and that him simply saying we call for humanitarian law to be followed is not enough? People will be held to account for the conduct of this war.
Exactly. He's stating the fact of the matter. I mean, international humanitarian law, which we expect all sides to follow, is there to be upheld.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The humanitarian situation is escalating. We know that the disease burden is rising at such a pace that without intervention, this will end up as a real humanitarian catastrophe. So what discussions is he having with the World Health Organization as well as the UN to follow what the aid agencies are calling for, and that is a ceasefire so they can get on top of the disease burden across Gaza?
She makes a good point about the disease burden, and what we are arguing for is increased flow of humanitarian support and medical supplies, not just through land, but also maybe via a seaborne route, and that's something we'll continue to do.
Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. So many of my constituents continue to contact me to press the government regarding its actions towards securing a ceasefire and to help the suffering of innocent civilians in Gaza. So to that end, can I ask the Minister, what recent discussions has the Foreign Secretary held to urge Israel not to besiege or blockade Gaza, to comply with international law and protect innocent lives?
Minister.
The Foreign Secretary has been hugely active, engaging with many different nations, and of course he was in Israel just some 10 days ago, making the point that we must ensure that the humanitarian impact of this conflict is constrained and limited.
James Murray.
Madam Deputy Speaker, in Gaza, innocent Palestinians are facing an unimaginable nightmare with a humanitarian catastrophe and thousands of civilians, including children, being killed. Further to his remarks to my honourable friend, can the Minister provide more detail about what the UK government is doing to urge Israel not to besiege or blockade Gaza, to comply with international law and to protect innocent lives?
Pointing out, Madam Speaker, that all sides must abide by international humanitarian law, that ultimately there cannot be a military solution to political problems in the Middle East. Clearly the terrorist group of Hamas, we hope, will not have a political role representing the Palestinian people, but a de-escalation and peace must come first.
I thank the Minister for answering the urgent question, and we now come to statement. Home Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And with permission, I would like to make a statement to the House on legal migration. Migration to this country is far too high and needs to come down. And today we are taking more robust action than any other government before in order to bring this down. Since my first day in the Home Office, just 3 weeks ago, I have been determined to crack down on those who try and jump the queue and exploit our immigration system. I've been working closely with my right honourable friend, the Immigration Minister, on this subject. The recent figures from the ONS show a provisional estimate of net migration for the year ending June 2023 of 672,000. Whilst this is lower than the ONS estimate for net migration for the year ending December 2022, it is still far too high. When our country voted to leave the European Union, we also voted to take back control of our borders. And thanks to this Conservative government, we now have a points-based immigration system through which we can control who comes to the UK. We prioritise the skills and talent that we need to grow our economy and to support our NHS, and we have a competitive visa system for globally mobile talent. For example, last year we expanded our health worker visa access to address the urgent need for more social care workers. The whole country can also be proud that in the last decade we have welcomed more than 500,000 people through humanitarian routes. People from Ukraine, from Hong Kong, from Afghanistan, including 85,000 from Ukraine and Hong Kong in the last year alone. The British people will always do the right thing by those in need. But they also, and they are absolutely right to, want to reduce overall immigration numbers, not only by stopping the boats and shutting down illegal routes, but by well-managed reduction in legal migration too. People are understandably worried about housing, about GP appointments, about school places, and access to other public services when they can see their communities growing and growing quickly in numbers. From January 2024, the right for international students to bring dependents will be removed unless they are on postgraduate courses designated as a research programme. We always want to attract the global brightest and best. We have also stopped international students from switching out of the student route into work routes before their studies have been completed. These changes will have a tangible impact on net migration. Madam Deputy Speaker, around 153,000 visas were granted to dependents of sponsored students in the year ending September 2023. Today, I can announce that we will go even further than those provisions already in place, with a 5-point plan to further curb immigration abuses, and that will deliver the biggest ever reduction in net migration. In total, this package, plus our reduction in student dependence, will mean around 300,000 fewer people will come in future years than have come to the UK last year. These measures are possible because we are building up our domestic workforce and supporting British workers. Thanks to the excellent work of my right honourable friend, the Work and Pension Secretary, our Back to Work plan will help people stay healthy, get off benefits and move into sustainable employment. It builds on the ambitious £7 billion employment package from the spring budget to help up to 1.1 million people with long-term health conditions, disabilities, or who have been on long-term unemployment to look for work, to get into work and to stay in work. We're also investing heavily in helping adults learn valuable skills and prepare for the economy of the future. And of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have world-class universities that help in that endeavour. So of a 5-point plan, the first of our 5 points will be to end the abuse of the health and care visa. We will stop overseas care workers from bringing family dependents, and we will require care firms in England to be regulated by the Care Quality Commission in order for them to sponsor visas. Approximately 120,000 dependents accompanied 100,000 care workers and senior care workers in the year ending September 2023. Only 25% of dependents are estimated to be in work, meaning a significant number are drawing on public services rather than helping to grow the economy. We recognise that foreign workers do great work in our NHS and health sector, But it is also important that migrants make a big enough financial contribution. Therefore, we will increase annual immigration health surcharge this year by 66%, from £624 to £1,035, to raise, on average, around £1.3 billion for the health services of this country every year. Second, we will stop immigration undercutting the salary of British workers. We will increase the skilled worker earnings threshold by a third to £38,700 from next spring, in line with the median full-term wage for those kinds of jobs. Those coming on health and social care visa routes will be exempt, so we can continue to bring in the healthcare workers on which our care sector and NHS rely. Thirdly, we will scrap cut-price shortage labour from overseas by ending the 20% going rate salary discount for shortage occupations and reforming the shortage occupation list. I have asked the Migration Advisory Committee to review the occupations on this list because of our new higher skilled worker salary thresholds, and we will create a new immigration salary list with a reduced number of occupations in coordination with the MAC. Fourthly, we will ensure people only bring dependents who they can support financially by raising the minimum income for family visas to the same threshold as the minimum salary threshold for skills workers, which is £38,700. The minimum income requirement of £18,600 has not been increased since 2012. Madam Deputy Speaker, this package of measures will take place from next spring. Finally, having already banned overseas master's students from bringing family members to the UK, I have asked the Migration Advisory Committee to review the graduate route to prevent abuse, to protect the integrity and quality of the UK's outstanding higher education sector. It needs to work in the best interests of the UK, supporting the pathway into high-quality jobs for the global talent pool, but reducing opportunities for abuse. Madam Deputy Speaker, this package of measures, taken in addition with the measures on student dependence that we have already announced in May, means that around 300,000 fewer people will be eligible to come to the UK than were coming last year. This is the largest reduction on record. Immigration policy must be fair, consistent, legal and sustainable. That is why we are also taking the fight to illegal migration. Our plan to stop the boats is working. Small boat arrivals are down by a third, even as illegal migration across the rest of Europe is on the rise. Madam Deputy Speaker, today we have taken decisive action to reduce legal migration with our 5-point plan. Enough is enough. We are curbing abuses to the healthcare visa. We are increasing thresholds, cutting the SOL discount, increasing family income requirements and cutting the number of student dependents, and I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, I thank the Home Secretary for advance sight of the statement. Today's statement is an admission of years of total failure by this Conservative government, failure on the immigration system and failure on the economy. It is another example of the total chaos at the heart of this government. Net migration has trebled since the last election, since the Conservatives promised to reduce it, and trebled as a result of their policies on the economy and on immigration, including the Prime Minister's policy decisions. In a chaotic panic, the Prime Minister now opposes the policies that he introduced and thinks that their own decisions are a problem. But who does the Home Secretary think has been in charge for the last 13 years? More chaos, more veering all over the place. Net migration should come down. Labour has called for an end to the 20% unfair discount for increased salary thresholds to prevent we have called for an end to the 20% unfair discount, also for increased salary thresholds to prevent exploitation and include advice from a strengthened Migration Advisory Committee, and most of all, we've called for a proper plan with clear links between the immigration system and training and the economy, workforce plans, none of which are included in the statement today because they have no grip, no proper plan. This is a chaotic approach. Immigration is important for Britain, and rightly we have helped Ukraine and Hong Kong. We benefit from international talent and students. But that is why the immigration system needs to be controlled and managed so that it is fair and effective, and also why net migration should come down from these record levels. But there needs to be a proper plan. It was this Conservative government who brought in the 20% wage discount that allowed employers to recruit at less than the going rate, even though the Migration Advisory Committee warned against it, even though it is completely unfair. They chose to apply salary thresholds, again lower than the Migration Advisory Committee originally proposed, and not to update them for years. And as Chancellor, and then, as Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Member for Richmond repeatedly blocked proposals to tighten the rules, including in May this year, and including when they refused Labour's calls to end the unfair 20% discount. And they repeatedly failed to listen to warnings about the failure to train or pay properly here in the UK. 12 months ago, I warned that work visas had substantially increased as a result of major skills shortages in the UK, and the Conservatives were not taking any serious action to address those skills shortages. The Leader of the Opposition 12 months ago warned the immigration system should be linked to new requirements to train up workers here at home. But the Conservatives did nothing, and unbelievably they are still doing nothing. Nothing in this statement about training requirements or workforce plans. They say they want fewer shortage occupations, but it was only 4 months ago that they added bricklayers, roof tilers, plasterers to the shortage list because they have totally failed on construction training here at home. There's no plans to tackle that. Engineering apprenticeships have halved since 2018. Well, no wonder engineering visas have gone up. Again, nothing to tackle those failures. And social care visas have gone up from 3,500 a year to over 100,000 a year because they have failed for years to heed warnings about recruitment and retention in social care, and they halved the budget for social care workforce recruitment and support back in the spring, and they are still not listening, still refusing to adopt Labour's plan for a proper workforce strategy for social care, including professional standards and a fair pay agreement. They're failing to tackle the delays in the asylum system that have also pushed the net migration figures up, failing to tackle NHS waiting lists that are preventing the long-term sick going back to work. And the Prime Minister is just crashing around all over the place, reversing policies that he introduced, criticising policies he defended 6 months ago, and introducing new immigration policies without any of the economic policies to match. The previous Prime Minister was accused of being a shopping trolley, veering around from one side to the other. The current Prime Minister is clearly veering, but he certainly isn't steering. He's just climbed into someone else's shopping trolley, and he's being pushed around all over the place. So can the Home Secretary tell us where is the workforce plan on social care, on engineering, on bricklaying, on all the shortage occupations that their total economic failure has left us with? Has the Migration Advisory Committee advised on these policies, and where's the reforms to strengthen the committee so that they can do so? And why are they still not introducing our requirements on employers or on the government to address the skills and labour shortages that are driving the increase in the net migration in the first place? The The Conservatives are in chaos. They've got no serious plan for the economy, no serious plan for the immigration system, no serious plan for the country. Britain deserves better than this.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I was waiting for the policy announcements from the Labour Party, and sadly, I'm still waiting. She talks about skills training. Madam Deputy Speaker, she talks about skills training. Hers was the party which, in government, dissuaded people from bringing about, from investing in their own skills, telling people that the only good job was a graduate job, undermining apprenticeships, something that we have set about repairing through our entire time in government. Hers was the party that in government failed to put transitional measures in place when the EU expanded, importing significant numbers of people in the construction industry, which meant there was a disincentive for investing in people and technology and productivity, a situation which she now decries. She fails to make reference to the £7 billion employment package that was announced in the spring budget that will help 1.1 million people get back into work and stay in work. Madam Deputy Speaker, when I was at the dispatch box in the days after my appointment, I said that Labour had a plan for migration. The problem that they have got, Madam Deputy Speaker, is the plan that they are proposing is the plan that I am already implementing. Working with my right honourable friend, the Immigration Minister, since the day I was appointed, we have put forward the most substantial package of legal migration reforms the country has ever seen. And their great idea is already being put in place by this great government.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I am very pleased to welcome about 4.5 of the 5 announcements that my right honourable friend has made, particularly the crackdown on the abuse of the dependence route, which has proved a weakness in the system over recent years, and the increase in the family visa rate. And I can assure him that when he is told that this will cause apocalyptic damage, when I first introduced it 10 years ago at 18,700, which he now says is too low, that was going to be apocalyptic for family life in this country. It wasn't then, it was the right protection then, and I'm glad he's increasing it now. However, can I ask him particularly about the health and care visa, and in particular the reduction of the inability of people now to bring dependents with them? How many care workers does he think will be deterred by that? How much fewer will be the numbers coming here? Because there is a huge shortage in the care sector at the moment of about 150,000, and I would hope that this isn't a significant contributor to the reduction in numbers, because if it is, it will cause damage to the care sector.
My right honourable friend asks an important question. I've looked in great detail. My right honourable friend, the Immigration Minister, and I have crunched these numbers in great detail. What we have actually seen through this particular scheme is the displacement of British workers. So the actual total numbers of people in this sector has not increased anywhere near as much as the number of people who have entered on this visa route. We also suspect, globally, there is a significant surplus demand, and whilst perhaps an individual with a family might be dissuaded because of the restrictions we have on family members, it is almost certainly the case that someone else that does not have those family commitments will be willing to put themselves forward. So we do not envisage there being a significant reduction in demand because of these changes that we've made. But what it will mean is that we have the care workers that we need, and not the estimated 120,000 other people that have in most recent years come with them.
SNP spokesperson Chris Stevens.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think this statement will be judged on whether, excuse me, it's pandering to the right wing of his own party, or whether it actually addresses the needs of the economy. And I see them all cheering there. So can the Home Secretary answer a number of questions? Can he tell me of the dependent figures that he mentioned, the 120,000? How many of those dependents are children? Or is he suggesting that children should be going into work? What discussions did he have with the Health Secretary? Because he mentioned his discussions with the Department of Work and Pensions. What discussions has he had with the Health Secretary? Because the Home Office figures show that 143,990 health and care worker visas were granted in the year ending September this year. That's more than double than September next year, which demonstrates perhaps the real crisis and creating more barriers and red tape will have on the NHS and care sector. And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, Professor Brian Bell, Chair of the Migration Advisory Committee, recently warned that limits in overseas care worker numbers could see a situation where lots of people won't get care. Does the Home Secretary recognise those remarks and recognise that his proposals may cause irrevocable harm to the care sector?
The point about dependence is an incredibly important one. And actually, if you listen carefully to the answer I gave to my right honourable friend, I made the point that we do not envisage a reduction in the number of people working in the care sector, but a reduction in the number of people that are coming with those workers, people, the vast majority of whom are not in work. And whether they are children or out-of-work adults, the simple truth of the matter is that that creates a burden on the British welfare system or the education system, on housing, on school places, on GPs, surgeries. So the offer that we are making is clear. We are supporting the health sector and the social care sector, but we are doing so in a way that minimises the additional pressure on communities. And the point that I would make is it is incredibly easy for us to say and do things that might superficially be viewed as generous. But the people who disproportionately carry the burden of the decisions that we make are those who are on the lower salaries, who are struggling to find housing, who are on waiting lists. And we should be conscious of their needs, and that is why we are being thoughtful and careful about the people that we are welcoming into our country.
Before we go any further, colleagues will recognise there are a large number of people wanting to catch my eye for this statement. We have another statement after that, and then we have an important piece of legislation to which there have been a large number of people who want to speak. So I would urge colleagues to be brief in their questions so that the Home Secretary can be concise in answers. I will only be calling people who arrived for the beginning of the Home Secretary's statement, and I'm trusting those who are late not to be standing. So Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Madam Deputy Speaker, does my right honourable friend think it would be a good idea to have a cap on the number coming in?
Whilst I understand the calls for a cap, in practical terms, managing a cap is difficult. We would want to make sure that we are being as generous as possible to the people who contribute to our society and to our economy, and recognise that not every single individual, whether that, the difference between a child that would count as one person against a cap, or to an investor that may bring a huge number of jobs, they are not the same, and we want to be able to make the difference between the two.
Chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, Dame Diana Johnson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as the Home Secretary will appreciate, the Home Affairs Select Committee is very keen indeed to scrutinise the policies of the Home Office. At our meeting last week, it proved very difficult because we couldn't get information about, for example, the cost of the Rwanda policy, asylum backlogs, and the number of children who are still missing from hotels as unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. So can we please have an assurance from the Home Secretary that when the Immigration Minister appears before the committee next week, that we will have the full evidence base and the economic impact for the policy announcements that have been made today?
I have no doubt that the Immigration Minister, hugely experienced in this portfolio, will come fully armed with the facts and figures at his fingertips.
Sir John Redwood.
ease the driver shortage was to train more people at home and pay them more. Isn't that the right model for these scarcity occupations?
Madam Deputy Speaker, my right honourable friend is absolutely right. What we want is a high-skilled, high-productivity, high-wage economy. These proposals and the work that my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, announced support that. They would do the opposite.
Tim Farron.
Madam Deputy Speaker, these proposals, or some of them at least, will be met with absolute horror in the Lake District hospitality and tourism industry. 20 million people visit our communities every year, £3.5 billion industry, and because of the failure of this government to provide sufficient affordable homes for local people and to have stupid visa rules, we now have a massive workforce crisis. Two-thirds of our businesses are unable to meet the demand that they have because of inadequate numbers of workers. Has he spoken to anybody working and managing in the Lakes hospitality industry, or does he not care what they think?
Madam Speaker, my right honourable friend, the Immigration Minister, met with the Lake District Tourist Board. So in specific answer to his question, yes, he has spoken to them. And the point is, the simple truth of the matter is we have analysed the figures. We know which sectors have brought in the most people. The hospitality sector is an incredibly important sector in the UK, a fantastic employer of local people. That's what we want to see in that sector.
Tim Lawton.
The migration figures are unsustainably high, notwithstanding the large element of Ukrainian and Hong Kong people coming here. So I welcome most of these proposals, particularly the action on dependents, which have gone up by 7-fold since 2020, particularly pertaining to care and health workers. And we've heard about care workers recruited to homes that don't exist and dependents who have no connection with those awarded visas being put together by people traffickers. So how are measures going to be taken to make sure that these are enforced and these abuses do not continue to happen?
We've already started to take action on this, and the proposals that we put forward today, the plans that we put forward today, will take that further. Ensuring that the CQC, ensuring that care homes are registered with the CQC goes a long way to addressing the abuses that he has discussed. We are putting plans forward which support our economy, support our health sector, support the British people, and do so in a way which is clear, transparent, predictable and fair.
Neil Coyle.
Madam Speaker, can the Home Secretary tell us which business groups or trade associations were involved in the development of these proposals and support them? Because their concern, the business concern that I've heard today, is that our national economic interest is once again in the hands of Tory headbangers.
Hear, hear. Madam Deputy Speaker, we have and we continue to work extensively with business to make sure that their needs for employees are supported, to support our economy, but also to do that in a way that does not undermine communities, that does not depress wages, and that works in support of the high-skill, high-wage economy that we aspire to, and he clearly does not.
George Eustace.
Deputy Speaker, isn't the problem with a skills-based immigration policy that it gives preferential access to bankers, to lawyers, to accountants, to economists, even though we have no need for such people in this country? We have plenty here, homegrown talent, but it actually makes it very difficult to recruit the people we do need. Care workers, people to work in the food industry, in manufacturing, producing things generally, or indeed in the tourism industry. So will the Secretary of State consider moving away from this failed skills-based migration policy and instead move to one based on the needs of our economy?
My right honourable friend, I have a huge amount of respect for my right honourable friend, but the truth is the figures just do not bear out his assessment. The vast majority of the people that we've seen in the last couple of years' worth of immigration figures are in the lower end of the skills spectrum. It just does not bear out the point that he's made.
Joanna Cherry.
Deputy Speaker. There is, of course, no evidence that immigration pushes down wages. But I don't know.
Absolutely.
I don't know if the Secretary of State has any elderly relatives in care. I do. And I know the invaluable contribution that overseas care workers make. Many of them are young men and women, for example, from the Philippines, and they are wonderfully hard-working, caring and very respectful of elderly people. Why should they be forced to leave their dependent children thousands of miles away in the Philippines? Can you answer that question?
I'm Deputy Speaker, no one's being forced to do anything. If people choose to come here, then they choose to abide by the rules that we put in place, and that is, I think, completely fair and appropriate. We value. My mother came to work in the NHS in the 1960s. We value the people from around the world who have come to support us, but it is right and fair that we put rules in place, that we let people know what those rules are, and that if they wish to come and join us in this wonderful country and work in our wonderful society, that they abide by those rules.
Sir Simon Clarke.
People in Liverpool South and East Cleveland will warmly welcome today's announcement because the immigration figures that we've seen over recent years are clearly unsustainable. Does it not speak volumes, in fact, that of course we're described as headbangers for pointing out what is blindingly obvious to those of us on these benches? What consideration has my right honourable friend given to an annual migration budget so that we can all be held accountable in this House for the choices that we make on behalf of our constituents?
My right honourable friend makes an important point that ultimately the decisions we make here do affect the lives of others, and we should always be conscious of the impact that our decisions have. And that is why we have listened very, very carefully to those people who have said that there are housing shortages in their local areas, that the school places are becoming harder to find in their local areas. And when they see figures significantly higher than they were promised, they would want us to take action. We are now taking action. That was always part of taking back control. And what we hear over and over again from the benches opposite, that they do not want us to take action. They are fundamentally wrong on this issue.
Alex Cunningham.
Deputy Speaker, when it was raised by my right honourable friend, the Shadow Home Secretary, last week, it appeared the Home Secretary didn't even realise that workers were being paid 20% less than foreign workers, less than UK workers, the so-called salary discount. But he's followed her good advice, and I welcome the end of this discrepancy. How will the new pay rule be applied to those already here?
The situation will be brought in next year, early part of next year, in close coordination with the Migration Advisory Committee. No one will be disadvantaged that is already here, but ultimately what we want to see is high-skilled, high-wage, high productivity economy. And whilst the Shadow Home Secretary says that the Labour Party want to address these issues, I made a quiet prediction to myself and others that each and every intervention from the opposite benches will be in complete contradiction to her position on the front bench.
Kelly Tolhurst.
Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Home Secretary today for his announcement at the dispatch box and the measures that he will be taking to bring down that number that is too big and unsustainable, particularly for communities within the South East. So I would like to ask my right honourable friend, now he's making the best of being able to change the policy to suit the needs of this country, will he look at going to an annual review where he will be altering those requirements and rules to suit the needs at the time that's suitable for this country?
Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend makes exactly the right point. Our promise to the British people was to take back control of our immigration system, take back control of our borders, a policy that was at the time and subsequently opposed by the party opposite. And taking back control means making adjustments, addressing the needs of our economy and our society. These adjustments, these changes that I'm putting forward today are in response to our economic needs as well as our social needs.
Rachel Maskell.
Madam Deputy Speaker, there's a global skills shortage around health and care workers. So they have got choices to go to other countries which will accept dependents. So what message does he have for the 7.8 million people currently on the NHS waiting list when they won't have the skills to provide the care they desperately need?
As predicted, Madam Deputy Speaker, each and every one of the speakers opposite thus far has opposed the proposals that I put forward, despite what the Shadow Home Secretary said. As she will have heard me answer now on two occasions, we do not envisage a reduction in demand because of the significantly large number of applicants that was originally envisaged when this visa scheme was put in place.
Chris Grayling.
I do find it baffling that, given we've had well over 1 million people come to this country in the last 2 years, the parties opposite don't seem to think it's a good idea to scale back. I congratulate my right honourable friend on this package. Will he also look at the question of those who come to study here? Because there is an automatic assumption at the moment that those who do so have a right to stay after they've studied and look for a job. And I do think there is a case for revisiting that and asking, is that right in all circumstances?
My right honourable friend is right to draw our attention to students. Our university sector is a global success story and widely respected around the world. We want to make sure it maintains that reputation for quality. We want to make sure that the global brightest and best who choose to come and study here and who come and work here are genuinely the global brightest and the best. Higher education should be a route to study and education rather than a visa route by the back door.
Alistair Carmichael.
Madam Deputy Speaker, since the crew for fishing vessels was added to the shortage occupation list by the government, only a handful of visas have been granted, not because of the earnings threshold, because most would meet that requirement comfortably, but because of the requirement for the English language test at level B1. Why does the Home Secretary think that B1 is an appropriate level for somebody working on a fishing boat?
Madam Deputy Speaker, an inability to speak English would hamper anybody, and it really is something which I think is entirely reasonable to expect of people who are coming here to work.
Absolutely. Steve Brown.
This year, vacancies in adult social care fell a little. The figure now stands at a mere 152,000, and that was due to a large increase in the number of care workers coming to this country as part of the shortage occupations list. The library tell me, as of September, there are 121,000 vacancies in the NHS. So can I ask the Home Secretary, what changes exactly does he envisage making to the shortage occupation list? Can he please show the workings out on the changes to family arrangements, which he said he's crunched the numbers with the Immigration Minister? And above all, could I ask, who did ministers consult in the health and care sector ahead of today's legal migration announcement?
We asked the MAC to look into these things. That's why it exists, and the point he makes is, however, a very, very important one, which speaks to why we are tightening the system to prevent abuse. Because anyone looking at the numbers would see a very significant number of people over the last couple of years have come on the health and social care visa system, and yet we have lost them to health and social care. That is not what any of us need or want. The right thing to do is for people to come who are genuinely going to be employed in that sector, which is where we need them, which is the promise that they have made to us and that we have made to them. And ensuring that that is the case is the right and fair thing to do.
Beth Winter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister said, and I quote, "Migration in this country is far too high and needs to come down." But as others have already said in the Chamber today, So many of the people who come into this country provide a critical contribution to our employment sectors, no more so than the gaping holes in our social care and health sector. So I'm interested to hear the Minister's response to Unison, the social care trade union, who say that the care system would implode without migrant care staff. And does he not agree that a better, more humane approach would be to fund local government to improve social care pay and conditions?
Madam Deputy Speaker, there you go again. As I said, once again, the Shadow Home Secretary saying that immigration numbers are too high, yet each and every one of the backbenchers on her party disagreeing with any action to deal with it. We have got to bring these numbers down. We have committed to do so, and we've put forward a thoughtful plan which takes into consideration the needs of the health and social care sectors.
Rachel McLean.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think the howls of outrage from the opposite benches really do highlight the inconsistency in Labour Party's position, given that they were the party wanted to overturn the referendum and introduce unlimited free movement of labour. But does the Home Secretary agree with me that pressure from migration puts pressure on local families and young people who want to buy or rent their own house? And so therefore, will he consider that every time he grants more visas for people to come to this country?
Madam Deputy Speaker, this is an incredibly important point. This is why control of immigration is so important. We are a generous country. We have demonstrated that generosity time and time again, whether it be the Ugandan Asians, whether it be people from West Africa, people from Hong Kong, people from Ukraine. We are rightly proud, but it is also important that we prove that we are thoughtful about the implications of those people who live here, whether they've lived here just for decades, for years, or for generations. And that is why it is right that we put forward these proposals, carefully calibrated, to support our economy, to support our health and social care needs, but also to bring down those figures.
Kamanjit Singh Desi.
Thank you very much. Madam Deputy Speaker, net migration figures are now 672,000, 3 times the level at the 2019 general election, when the Conservatives promised to reduce them. So does the Home Secretary concede that the Tories have failed miserably on immigration policy, along with a whole host of other policies, and that is why their time is now well and truly up?
No, I don't.
Sir Edward Lee.
In raising the threshold to 38,000, may I congratulate the government on taking a thoroughly common-sense view of this. I say that as a senior citizen member of the New Conservative, so I congratulate the government. But what does this phrase here mean? Those coming on the health and social care visa route will be exempted so we can continue to bring the healthcare workers that our care sector and the NHS need. What does that mean? Will this not drive a coach and horses through this? Surely the solution here is for the care sector to pay proper wages.
Well, we have recognised the recruitment challenge of domestic workers in the health and social care system. We have made clear on a number of occasions that we are not going to allow these incredibly important public services on which we rely to go without the staff that they need. What we are looking to do is bring in the people who are actually employed in these sectors, but not the dependents that they have typically brought with them. That will bring down those headline numbers, as we have committed to do, whilst protecting the health and social care sectors, which we have also committed to do.
Sir Ben Bradshaw.
But he's admitted several times that we're losing people from the health and social care sector, both domestic workers and people that the government has brought in. But he said nothing about increasing pay, has he?
We have said over and over again that we are working towards a higher productivity, higher skilled, higher wage employment sector across all sectors of employment. What we have said is the current regime, the current visa regime, has displaced workers, which is why we're changing it.
Jonathan Gullis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The people of Stoke-on-Trent North Kidsgrove and Talk will welcome
the announcement today from the Home Secretary and, of course, his right honourable friend, the Minister for Immigration, whilst also realising the faux outrage of the party opposite, who can talk tough with the rhetoric on the front bench, but the squirming on the back benches of uncomfortableness when it comes to talking about immigration is something that I enjoy thoroughly, especially when we know they wish to return free movement through the back door. But will my right honourable friend confirm that in future reviews we will actually look to introduce stopping the dependency route for those on one-year research master's degrees as well?
Well, we have committed to do a wider review of the higher education route, the postgraduate route. I take on board the point that he's made. We have already taken action on this. I commit to review this. Once we've seen the outcome of the review, I will be able to update him and the House on the decisions that we make.
Leila Moran.
Deputy Speaker, there was a choice that could have been made here. It was either protect the flank against the Reform Party or back British business. I don't understand how he thinks that the way to create jobs for local people is to starve sectors like the science industry from, for example, the lab technicians that they need to drive what they need to do. How on earth does he think this is going to help anyone in Oxford, Western Abingdon get a job when those industries that employ them won't be able to grow?
Deputy Speaker, it would have been better had she listened to the points that we made about protecting the scientific community in and around Oxford, in ensuring that we still remain attractive to the global brightest and best, to ensure that we protect the people we protect the people who need our protection in the health and social care sector by ensuring that those are staffed. But the simple fact is that we have committed to bring these numbers down. These proposals bring those numbers down and do so in a way that reinforces our commitment to have a higher skilled, more productive, higher wage economy.
Sir Julian Lewis.
In order for any large-scale immigration policy to succeed, does the Home Secretary accept that it's necessary for people to wish to integrate? And what steps are the government taking to ensure that it is a smooth path to integration for those large numbers of people who do come here?
My right honourable friend makes an incredibly important point. This is why I replied earlier about the need for English language. If someone is denied the ability to communicate in the country that they choose to call home, they will be permanently disadvantaged and find it harder to integrate. We want people to integrate. We want people to be and feel part of our communities. We want the communities that they move into to welcome them and to be confident that the immigration system of this country supports both those new arrivals that choose to make this country their home and the people who already live here.
Justin Madders.
Thank you. Madam Deputy Speaker, after 13 years in power and 7 years after we voted to leave the EU, I don't know why anyone would believe that this government will reduce net migration in the way that has been claimed today. But if we assume that the Home Secretary's figures are right, net migration will still be higher than it was in 2019 when his party promised to reduce it. That's right, isn't it?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the simple truth is the British people have far more confidence in the party that campaigned to take back control of its immigration system, rather than the party that would maintain free movement and whose contributions from the opposition benches have, unsurprisingly, been in opposition to the decisions that we are taking to bring down the numbers of net migration.
Steve Double.
Mr Speaker, I very much welcome the announcement today, and particularly the measures to stop the abuse of the health and care visa. The Home Secretary will be aware of a number of bogus care companies who are charging people tens of thousands of pounds to come to this country only to find that there is no job. Many of them are ending up in Cornwall. So I think I understood him when he said these measures will be introduced in the spring. Could I urge him to look at bringing that forward so that we can end this effectively people trafficking and ripping people off and the misery that it's causing?
My honourable friend is absolutely right that the people who are brought here on a false premise are victims of abuses of this system. We want to make sure, in fact, we are already taking action to address those abuses. This package of reforms goes further still with the necessity to be subscribed to the CQC. And he's absolutely right that abuses hurt everybody, and we will continue to take action to address them.
Patrick Grady.
Deputy Speaker, of course, net migration figures are also affected by the number of people who choose to leave the country. And since Brexit, it's been much more difficult for people from Glasgow North who want to live, study or work in Europe. So for any extended period of time. So what steps is the government taking to negotiate more visa exchange programmes with the European Union and other countries that could allow the sharing of skills and experience across borders at pretty much a neutral, at the very least, a neutral effect on net migration?
Well, without wanting to drift back into my old portfolio, I actually, with close coordination with my right honourable friend, the Immigration Minister, actually negotiated a number of youth mobility programmes to attract the brightest and the best. And he's talking about people leaving certain geographies. He might want to reflect on the fact that a significant number of people are leaving Scotland to come south of the border because of the pernicious income tax regime that the SNP government in Edinburgh have put in place.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to thank my right honourable friends, the Home Secretary and the Immigration Minister, for listening to us, and the measures that he has announced today I'm sure will be welcomed by constituents in Grimsby. But would he agree with me, not only do we need these measures to come quickly, perhaps we need some more conditionality. So for instance, if we have people coming here supposedly to take up skilled or skill shortage jobs and they're not doing so, then perhaps we should invite people not to stay.
I thank my honourable friend for the comments she's made about these reforms, and I do pay tribute to my right honourable friend, the Immigration Minister, who I know has been working for longer than the 3 weeks that I've been in this role. She is right that we want to bring people here in good faith. We expect them to act in good faith. If they apply in a certain visa route, we expect them to abide by the conditionality of that visa route. If they contribute, if they play by the rules, if they do the right thing, they will always be welcomed. But we, of course, do take a dim view of those people who seek to abuse our hospitality.
Clive Efford.
So, immigration figures have trebled since the general election in 2019, but it's worth reminding ourselves that back then the Conservatives were telling us that they were going to reduce them to the tens of thousands. So the scale of the failure is enormous, and it's underlined by the Office of National Statistics that says there are 90,000 involved in those figures that are asylum seekers who have been waiting for their asylum cases to be dealt with for over a year. So over 15% of it is due to the sheer incompetence of his department. So what's he going to do about that? Because I didn't see anything, any reference to that in his statement.
We have increased the pace of decision-making of our asylum processing system tenfold. I would remind him that in the most recent years we have had a very generous offer to the people of Hong Kong and to the people of Ukraine, and I know the British people will recognise of the two parties which one of them will grip immigration, and it certainly won't be his.
Neil O'Brien.
This is an excellent package and a big step in the right direction towards a higher skill, higher wage economy with less pressure on our housing and infrastructure. But will my right honourable friend put into the library of the House of Commons the analysis behind his statement that this package plus the reduction in student dependence previously announced will mean that more than 300,000 people who came last year would not be able to? It would be interesting to understand how much of that is the previously announced reduction in student dependence, how much of it comes from each of the different announcements made today, and how it compares to the forecast for future migration laid out by the OBR in the most recent EFO. Will you put that into the House of Commons? Because a previous government was rightly mocked for saying that only tens of thousands of people would come from Eastern Europe. They were completely wrong. As well as having a better policy, can we also have more transparency?
My honourable friend makes a very important point. I'm more than happy to put our estimates of the impact of these announcements and the previous announcements in the library.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I understand exactly what the Minister is trying to do in relation to migration, and there is a need to do some of those things. But I work closely with the Northern Ireland producers' organisation back home in Northern Ireland, and fishing is very much an industry where foreign workers are welcomed and where there's a clear shortage. In the past, whenever we left the EU, we were promised, and I mean that's the fishing sector, we were promised that things would get better, quotas would make the stock more available, and therefore the fishing sector would grow. The fishing sector welcomed that. Then, whenever it came to the minimum of 18,600, the average wage in Northern Ireland for a fisherman is £24,000. The English language became the next obstacle, and the sector is trying to enjoy that, and trying to agree to that as well. Can I ask the Minister, would there be some realism in relation to the threshold for skilled workers of £38,700, because it really doesn't give the sector, the fishing sector, the opportunity that they need to be active and to employ people?
I absolutely take the point on board that the honourable gentleman makes. We'll be working with the MAC about ensuring that as we get rid of the shortage occupation list, that we don't undermine key industries. I want to ensure the fishing industry, whether it be in Northern Ireland, whether it be on the east coast of Scotland, can remain viable, profitable, and that will always be part of our thinking.
Miriam Cates.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I do warmly welcome this statement and these measures, and I thank my honourable friend and my honourable friend, the Immigration Minister, for listening to colleagues across these benches, especially our New Conservatives group. Extraordinary growth in the levels of immigration over recent years has been masking some long-term structural weaknesses in our economy, like low productivity, high debt, falling birth rates and negative balance of trade, by propping up the OBR's superficial GDP growth figures. So does my right honourable friend agree that in order to permanently bring down immigration numbers, the OBR must instead turn its attention to the kind of growth that really matters to our constituents: skills growth, wage growth, housing growth, industry growth, in other words, real growth?
I can assure my honourable friend that we in government remain relentlessly focused on the very issues that she has raised: increasing skills, increasing productivity, increasing investment in plant and machinery and technology to unlock the full economic potential of this country is absolutely at the heart. We will always make our case to the OBR. We will do what we know to be in the best interests of this country and the people that work in this country.
Richard Drax.
Can I commend my honourable friend for at last tackling an unsustainable issue? Yeah. But was he, like me, a little concerned that two very high-ranking officials were unable at a parliamentary committee to answer basic questions on migrant issues? Can he assure me that this will not happen and these 5 excellent points will be pushed through by the Home Secretary forthwith?
I can assure my honourable friend that we will deliver these proposals with alacrity and at pace.
Dr Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In Sleaford, North Highcombe, my constituents believe that migration is too high, and so can I welcome the statement today and thank the Home Secretary and the Immigration Minister for all their hard work in developing these proposals. We've heard already from the other side how some large businesses will bemoan the fact they no longer have access to cheap labour undercutting the British workforce. But do he agree with me that the raising the threshold to 38,000 will actually mean the businesses will need to invest in technology, higher wages and better conditions for the domestic workforce?
One of the things that I think a lot of businesses will understand is that to be really profitable, their best choice is to invest in their own businesses and to invest in their own people. Through the super deduction policies that my right honourable friend the Chancellor has put forward, we are encouraging businesses to invest in technology to unlock productivity. We're encouraging them to also invest in the people that they employ, because we are committed to that high wage, high productivity, high growth economy.
Alexander Stafford.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome this announcement today that will cut about 300,000 people off our net migration figures. But does the Home Secretary agree with me that the number of migrants the UK allows in each year should be directly proportional to and related to the number of new homes, new GPs and new school places we have? Because at the moment, the current situation is completely unsustainable.
an important point, an important part of taking back control of our migration processes is to give planners, particularly at local government level, the ability to have some kind of certainty as to the demand. We see the demand from migration fall unevenly across the UK, putting some communities under great pressure, particularly coastal communities. We want to make sure that we have a planned, controlled immigration system. That's why we're making these changes. That's why we're bringing these numbers under control, so that local government planners and others have some more certainty about the future.
Tom Hunt.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome these measures. I must say it's a shame it's taken so long. These measures should have been published after the last ONS stats were published. I suggested a number of ideas how we could keep our promise to the British public. There is great cynicism amongst the country when it comes to politicians talking about immigration. They've heard it all before. Can the Home Secretary promise to me that in the months ahead he will explicitly demonstrate to the British public that this time it's different, this time we mean it, and this time the public will see change?
Well, I can assure my honourable friend that the Immigration Minister and I had our first conversations on these figures before the ONS figures came out. I discussed the plans that he had been working on for some time. Within, not even days, within hours of being appointed to this role, we're working closely with the Treasury and other government departments about the implications on them. This package is subscribed to across government. It will be delivered, and whilst we recognise that it won't be an instant fix, and I think the House has to be realistic about the fact that this won't be an overnight fix, we are absolutely committed to bring these figures down and take back control of our borders.
Brendan Clark-Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I also warmly welcome and thank the Home Secretary for this highly robust statement that he's brought to the House today, and of course the excellent work the Immigration Minister has also done on this in responding to the concerns of my constituents in Bassetlaw and the constituents of others. But does my right honourable friend agree that this also means that we do still continue to bring the brightest and the best to this country and those seeking help and refuge, such as those from Ukraine and Hong Kong, but not those who, along with dependents, do not represent some form of net benefit to the UK and consume more than they contribute?
I visited businesses in my honourable friend's constituency not long ago, and I can see the desire in the businesses that we met, whether they be traditional metalworking businesses or high-tech drone businesses, that they want the brightest and best. They want people who are genuinely committed to contributing to our economy. That is the default setting of the British people. We are generous at heart. We have got a track record of being very generous, but we do expect people to play by the rules. We do expect people to contribute to our society and to our economy. That is not too much to ask. We are putting those conditions in place, conditions which, unsurprisingly, are opposed over and over and over again by all the parties opposite.
Roberts.
I declare an interest as the chair of the APPG for the Philippines. Madam Deputy Speaker, after the UK and India, the Philippines provides the third highest number of workers in our health service and would be in a very, very difficult place without their vital work in keeping us safe and well. I welcome that people coming on the healthcare visa route will be exempt from the increased salary requirements, but the cost of permanent residency remains extremely challenging and a barrier to entry. Given that the Home Secretary has said a number of times about integration and their importance in our communities, will my right honourable friend meet with me and representatives of the Filipino Nurses Association to discuss how we might be able to help them make this country their permanent home as thanks for their amazing work?
I absolutely recognise the contribution that medical professionals from the Philippines contribute to the UK. Indeed, I was in Manila not long ago, just before I was appointed as Home Secretary, and I do absolutely value their contribution. We want to make sure that we support the people who want to come and work, that we ensure that those roles are filled, that actually using technology, and there is technology opportunity in the health and social care sector, that we increase productivity to fund those wage increases. I will, of course, take the opportunity to speak with him, and if my diary commitments allow, I will try and find an opportunity to speak with representatives of the Filipino community here in the UK as well.
I thank the Home Secretary for his statement, and we now come to a statement from the Deputy Prime Minister and Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Oliver Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We live in a dangerous and volatile world. The risks are more numerous, more complex, and are evolving more rapidly than ever before. The aftermath of the global pandemic, Russia's ongoing aggression in Ukraine, extreme weather events, cyber attacks, malign AI use cases. All of these and more threaten the security, safety, and stability of our nation. Protecting people is the first duty of government, which is why resilience is a top priority for this government. It is, quite simply, the means by which we seek to prevent risks becoming a reality. Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, forgive me, when I published the Resilience Framework last December, I promised to provide an annual update to the House on our progress, and this statement fulfills that commitment. The accompanying paper sets out in full the progress we have made. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, allow me to detail to the House the key improvements that I am confident have greatly improved our resilience. We have made changes to our structures, such as the introduction of the Resilience Directorate, Cobra Unit and Situation Centre. We have initiated new capabilities, such as the new Emergency Alert System. We have bolstered our resources towards severe threats, such as through our biological security strategy, underpinned by over £1.5 billion of annual investment. And we are embedding a whole-of-society approach to resilience that reflects the fact that everybody has their part to play. As Deputy Prime Minister, I am the lead Minister for Resilience, and I chair a new Resilience Subcommittee of the National Security Council. Government needs to be ready to respond to any and all risks, so we must maintain the flexibility to respond to whatever confronts us. In the last year, as chairman of the UK Resilience Forum, I have regularly convened blue light and local responders, industry leaders and representatives from the voluntary sectors with government. And we have continued to play an active role with international partners, including the OECD, NATO, Five Eyes, and bilaterally with our allies. And through the Department for Levelling Up, we are significantly strengthening the capability and capacity of local resilience fora. And the National Risk Register, published this year, is the most transparent ever, because it is vital that we all understand the threats that we face. And when I say all of us, I mean the whole of society, from government to emergency responders, industry, voluntary and community leaders, and citizens too. And last week, I was at Porton Down to inspect the vital work done there to protect the United Kingdom from chemical, biological, and radiological threats. Indeed, in my right honourable friend's constituency, I believe. And I saw the laboratories where highly skilled staff dedicate themselves to improving our preparedness for future pandemics and defending our country against malicious attacks such as those that we saw in Salisbury. The people I met there and our wider resilience community are on the front line. They make our people safer and our country stronger. And so today, let me champion them and pay tribute to them for the work that they do. And indeed, may I also pay tribute to the local resilience fora up and down the country who are there for us when we need them through every kind of crisis, as we saw most vividly demonstrated during the COVID pandemic. Yeah. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, our work to make our country as resilient as possible is a constant endeavour. The Resilience Framework sets out ambitious plans to continue to strengthen the frameworks, systems and capabilities which underpin the UK's resilience through to 2030. And we are building on those plans. The government has a role in bringing all actors together and to give them the skills they need. So today I can announce we are developing a new UK Resilience Academy that will improve the skills of those groups. It will provide a range of learning and training opportunities for the whole of society. For professionals, there will be a curriculum to build skills, knowledge and networks, and a centre for excellence for exercising. For businesses, there will be greater guidance and particularly assistance on threats to critical national infrastructure and cyber. And for citizens, there will be a unified government resilience website, which will provide practical advice on how households can prepare as part of a campaign to raise awareness of the simple steps individuals can take to raise their resilience. Madam Deputy Speaker, the COVID pandemic demonstrated the overwhelming community spirit of our nation, whether it was the vaccine army, the thousands of NHS workers who returned to the front line, or the millions, through little acts of kindness, who sought to protect the vulnerable and the lonely. And so there will be a new website to provide a volunteering hub, a one-stop shop to help all those who want to help their communities when crises strike. And we are also continuing to develop our approach to chronic risks. These are the challenges which, if left unchecked, will continue to erode our economy, society, community and national security. And building on the National Risk Register, we're developing new analyses and a programme of action that we will publish next year. And as the COVID-19 pandemic showed, shocks have impacts across the whole of society, including imposing significant economic consequences. So that's why we've allocated an additional 10 million of new funding for research on risks to the economy and to our public finances, to better factor in the savings that we can achieve in the long run by spending on resilience today, ensuring the stability of our economy and to support the sustainability of our public finances well into the future. Madam Deputy Speaker, we have made considerable progress over the past year, and our focus is now firmly on the months, years, and indeed decades ahead. We are learning the lessons of the COVID-19 pandemic, which shone a light on the importance of resilience, as well as the lessons of the UK's world-leading vaccine programme, which set us free again and demonstrated the importance of prevention rather than cure. Resilience is our immunisation against risk, and these measures are a shot in the arm for Britain and its national security. The world may be more dangerous than ever, but we will be better prepared than ever. And I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State Pat McFadden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement. He is right that resilience is a critical function for government, local government, public services, business and society in an ever more volatile world. And I want to congratulate the Secretary of State for surviving the year between the publication of the National Resilience Framework and the delivery of this statement. This is a rare achievement in a government where the principle is that everybody gets to be famous for 15 minutes. So I congratulate him on his longevity. I also welcome his announcement of the UK Resilience Academy and the Volunteering Hub. The Secretary of State is right that given the chance, the British public will step up to help their fellow citizens. Now, we should have a broad concept
of resilience: physical, cyber, financial, supply chains, the public realm, our values, our democracy. So let me ask the Secretary of State about some of these. The need for greater resilience has been underlined by the recent history of our country. COVID exposed huge flaws in advanced planning, which ended up costing the taxpayer billions of pounds, some of which was wasted on dodgy contracts and some lost to downright fraud. Never again should the country be put at the mercy of inside tracks, VIP lanes and special access for those who happen to know ministerial phone numbers. So what lessons has the government learned from the huge degree of waste and fraud lost in COVID contracts? And why has so little taxpayers' money been recovered compared to the vast amount lost in the first place? The invasion of Ukraine and the subsequent energy crisis exposed the short-sightedness of getting rid of gas storage, ditching home insulation programmes and being exposed to hugely volatile energy spot markets. Why is it that the government's new policy is to roll back on the transition mandated by its own legislation for net zero and prolong our reliance on international fossil fuel markets? For these failures, the British public has paid a heavy price. And how will the government increase resilience in the public estate? Schools' capital budgets cut back under this Prime Minister's watch while he was Chancellor. School roofs falling in, disrupting children's education. When will the government be able to ensure that children don't have to be taught in classrooms where the ceilings are held up by temporary supports? This shouldn't be too much to ask. Of course, not all risks are physical, and we have both opportunities and challenges in the development of AI. We've seen cyber attacks in recent years, such as the WannaCry attack on the NHS and the ongoing one on the British Library. And I appreciate this is a major challenge, and the old distinctions between state and non-state actors are blurring. But what more can the government do to protect critical systems from cyber attacks? Which brings me to perhaps our most important asset, which is our democracy itself. With an election coming sometime in the next year, I'm sure the Secretary of State would agree that we need to do all we can to ensure it is conducted in a free and fair manner. And with that in mind, can I ask him why the government's been so slow to implement the recommendations of the Intelligence and Security Committee's report on Russia, which was published a couple of years ago? That report called Russian influence in the UK the new normal, citing, and I quote, connections at the highest level with access to UK companies and political figures, and said that Russia carries out malicious cyber activity in order to assert itself aggressively, for example, to interfere in other countries' elections. In the face of these findings, how will the government ensure that our forthcoming election is protected against interference, either from Russia or from any other actors who may wish to do this? Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, can I ask the Secretary of State about the governance of this strategy? Because the perennial question for a cross-party departmental strategy like this is whether it's driven by the departments or by the centre. Now, given the traditional strengths of departments in the Whitehall system, how can the Secretary of State ensure that the centre over which he presides is strong enough to enforce preparedness and deliver the national resilience that all sides of the House want to see?
Well, I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for his words about my longevity, and I very much intend that to continue, and I'll take that in the spirit with which I'm sure he meant it. The Right Honourable Gentleman asked me about a range of issues. I'll seek to address as many of them as I can, but I'm happy to follow up if I've missed any of them. First of all, he talked about the range of risks that we face as a nation, and he's absolutely right that one of the principal tasks of government, and indeed my department, is to be across all of those risks. which we have done for many years through things like the National Security Risk Register. But what we've done differently since COVID is to be much more public about those risks with the National Risk Register, which sets out the range of risks that the nation faces, their likelihood and their impact. And that's an unprecedented amount of information we've put into the public domain to help people prepare, whether they are individuals or businesses or local government or voluntary organisations. In relation to COVID preparedness, that's precisely why we've introduced the Biological Security Strategy, a £1.5 billion annual investment to prepare ourselves for the whole range of biological hazards we might face. And indeed, as part of that, we have the 100-day challenge. The crucial thing, if we have another pandemic, whatever form it takes, is getting rapidly from the point at which the disease is sequenced to an effective vaccine. And that's why we are boosting our capabilities to be able to do that within 100 days, because that's what we saw during COVID was the key to setting people free. In relation to COVID contracts, I would gently point out to the right honourable gentleman, indeed members opposite, at the time of COVID, members opposite were constantly calling for us to go faster and to look at a wider range of suppliers. Indeed, I think at one point we were urged to seek the services of costumiers and football clubs. But what we have done since is to recover huge amounts of money through establishing the Public Sector Fraud Authority, and actually that has recovered double its target in the first year. The right honourable gentleman mentioned the resilience of energy. It's actually under this government that we have invested in renewables, and we have not only the world's largest offshore wind farm, we have the second, the third, the fourth, and now indeed the fifth, and many more in the pipeline. And I am in constant contact with my right honourable friend, the Energy Secretary of State, and we continue to work to ensure that we have the resilience for our energy networks this winter. In terms of cyber, he is absolutely right to raise the risks around cyber. It is undoubtedly the case, and indeed I have said this to the House previously, that the risk landscape around cyber continues to